from parents or maybe your family elders or some local priest that we may have met in some Vedic rituals that we may have performed? Or is there an authentic process for attaining perfection? An authentic process for actually getting what we really want in our heart? The answers lie within the pages of Bhagavad Gita. But before we go into today's verse, let us start with prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 25. Yanti Devavrata Devan Yanti Devavrata Devan Pitran Yanti Pitravrataha Pitran Yanti Pitravrataha Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Api Ma Yanti Madhyajino Api Ma Yanti Deva Prata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Api Ma Yanti Deva Vrata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Bhima Yanti Deva Vrata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Bhima Yanti Deva Vrata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Bhima Yanti Deva Vrata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Bhima Yanti Deva Vrata Deva Pitran Yanti Pitravrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Madhyajino Bhima. Would you like to chant? Online? Anybody would like to chant online?
Yanti Deva. Go ahead, bro. Yanti Deva Vrata Deva.
Yanti Deva Vrata Deva
Yanti Pitravrata.
Pitran Yanti Pitravrata
Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja.
Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja
Yanti Madhyajino Bhima.
Yanti Madhyajino Bhima
Yanti Deva Vrata Deva.
Yanti Deva Vrata Deva
Yanti Pitravrata.
Pitran Yanti Pitravrata
Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja.
Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja
Yajino Bhima.
Yanti Madhyajino Bhima Anyone else online? Synonyms. Yanti, achieve. Devavrataha, worshippers of demigods. Devan, two demigods. Pitra, two ancestors. Yanti, go. Pitravrataha, worshippers of ancestors. Bhutani, the ghosts and spirits. Yanti, go. Bhutejaha, worshippers of ghosts and spirits. Yanti, go. Mat, mine. Yajinaha, devotees. Abhi, also. Nam, to me. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. Translation with repetition. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship me will live with me. If anyone has any desire to go to the moon, the sun, or any other planet, one can attain the desired destination by following specific Vedic principles recommended for that purpose. These are vividly described in the fruitive activities portion of the Vedas, technically known as Darsha Pauramasi, which recommends a specific worship of demigods situated on different heavenly planets. Similarly, one can attain the Pita planets by performing a specific yajna. Similarly, one can go to many ghostly planets and become a yaksha, raksha, or pishacha. Pishacha worship is called black arts or black magic. There are many men who practice this black art and they think that it is spiritualism, but such activities are completely materialistic. Similarly, a pure devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead only achieves the planets of Vaikuntha and Krishna Loka without a doubt. It is very easy to understand through this important verse that if by simply worshipping the demigods one can achieve the heavenly planets, or by worshipping the Pita, achieve the Pita planets, or by practicing the black arts, achieve the ghostly planets, why can the pure devotee not achieve the planet of Krishna or Vishnu? Unfortunately, many people have no information of these sublime planets where Krishna and Vishnu live. And because they do not know of them, they fall down. Even the impersonalists fall down from the Brahmajyoti. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore distributing sublime information to the entire human society to the effect that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can become perfect in this life and go back home, back to God. Thus ends a wonderful transcendental Bhakti Vedanta Purpose. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. The wonderful verse that we are studying today. Yanti Deva Prata Devan Pitran Yanti Pitravrataha Bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajino abhimam. This is a very frequently quoted verse by Srila Prabhupada, right from introduction to Bhagavad Gita to several verses in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. This verse has been quoted, including some books called Easy Journey to Other Planets. Yanti Deva Prata Devan. And in this purport also Prabhupada is saying this is an important verse. So let us see what this verse is. Yanti Deva Prata Devan. Yanti is to achieve. So Deva Prata is worshippers of demigods. So Deva Prata Devan Yanti. That is how we should read this. Deva Prata Devan Yanti. That is those who are worshippers of demigods. They achieve the planets of demigods. And then Pitravrataha Pitran Yanti. Pitravrataha means Pitra means forefathers. Pitra. And Pitra Vrata, that is worshippers of, say, ancestors, forefathers, same thing. So Pitra Vrata, Pitra Yanti. Pitra is the planets of the ancestors. There is a specific planetary system called Pitra Loka. So those who are the worshippers of Pitra, they achieve that specific planetary system called Pitra Loka. Bhuteja Bhutani Yanti. Bhuteja. Bhuta Ijya. Ijya is to worship. Bhuta Ijya. Bhuta Ijya is worshippers of ghosts and spirits. What happens to them? Bhutani Yanti. They go to the planets of the ghosts and spirits. And then comes the punchline. Yanti Madhyajino Apima. Oh, this battery is over. This goes into YouTube. Another speaker is also fine. Another mic. That's it easier for me. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Then the punchline. Yanti Madhyajino Apimam. That is Madhyajina. Madhyajinaha. Those who are devotees of Krishna, Madhyajina, my Krishna is saying this. So those who are devotees of Krishna, they reach Krishna's planet. They live with me. They will live with me. Specifying this. Actually, there is no way for us to know how we can be permanently free from the cycle of birth and death unless we are given this information directly by the Supreme Lord or by his pure devotee. And here the Lord is personally speaking that here is the way by which you can reach me. So really these are seminal verses, very important verses, which we can commit to memory and implement in our lives, because there is a direct formula being given by the Lord of the repercussions of taking specific certain actions. And these activities that the Lord is referring to are practiced sometimes. Sometimes they're practiced simply whimsically. Sometimes they're practiced based on the instructions given in the Vedic literature. But in both cases, there is a specific consequence to that. One may worship the devatas based on the instructions given in the Vedic literature, or the forefathers, the ancestors. That also worship procedure is given very detailed manner in the Vedic literature. So then one may question, oh, the Vedic literatures are providing these steps, then why is it that it appears to be something less than perfect? The question may be raised, and that we can answer. But right now, this verse, let's just try to understand that very clearly Krishna is making a distinction. Without explicitly making a distinction, he is making a distinction between living with me, that is living with Krishna, versus other kinds of destinations. So these other kinds of destinations, whether it be the Devatas planets, or maybe the ancestral realm, Pitraloka, or the planets where the ghosts and spirits reside, they are all in one category, including all the heavenly planets where the Devatas reside. And Krishna's own planet is in a different category. So he's making this distinction. and it is that this distinction should not be missed. So it is implied that it is far superior to be living with Krishna than his other destination. There is implication. But of course, elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very, very clearly uh, describes why the distinction is there. What is the greatness about his abode? Yad gatvana nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. It is abode, Krishna's abode is such a place where once a person reaches, there is no coming back. Whereas, as far as the other verses are, other places are concerned, they are temporary, and when a person goes there, it is not a permanent destination. One has to come back to this earthly planet and once again start performing various activities, and after which one may either go up to higher elevated planetary systems or to lower planetary systems. One may enjoy, one may suffer. But in all cases, they are all temporary. That is explained in other places. But right now here, we can see that Krishna is making a distinction between Madhyajino Abhimam, those who come and live with me, versus they will live in other places. Prabhupada has wonderfully explained this in the purport as well, about the Vedic rituals that provide various processes for Devata worships, demigod worship, etc. And the difference between that and the transcendental process taking to Krishna consciousness, and how that has to be that is being broadcast. The sublime process of Krishna consciousness is now being broadcast, so that one may understand that simply by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Simply by chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one may develop love for Krishna, and one may go back home, back to Godhead. The exact sentences that he's saying is that unfortunately people do not have information about the sublime planets when Krishna and Vishnu live. And because they do not know of them, they fall down. Even the impersonalists fall down from Brahmajyoti. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore distributing sublime information to the entire human society to the effect that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become perfect in this life and go back home, back to God. Let us take a closer look at some of these processes of Devata worship that has been given here. You see here, Darsha Paurnamasi, technically known as Darsha Paurnamasi. Actually, in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the second canto, the third chapter, there is description of various types of worships that one may undertake for various objectives. I don't know if you have all seen this before, but before that, I want to relate this small story. Some of you may recognize this picture of a great king by the name Shibi Chakravarti, Shibi Maharaj. Once there was the king of the heavens, Indra. He came in the form of an eagle, and Agni Deva came in the form of a pigeon to test the charitable nature of this king, who was famous throughout the world, throughout the universe, in fact. It is mentioned in Bhagavatam that this king Shibi was actually known throughout the universe, famous throughout the universe for his charitable nature. So to test him, the pigeon first came to the king and took shelter of the king. And king is supposed to be the representative of Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead gives shelter to everyone who seeks shelter, does not discriminate. Whether it is a human being or an animal, bird, always gives shelter to anyone who seeks shelter. So this pigeon has taken shelter of Shivi Maharaj, and being a good king that he was, pious good kings, they have some of the qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, small measure. So he had this quality of being true to his word, protecting his subjects, and being very charitable. So he gave protection to the pigeon. No problem. Please take shelter. Nobody will trouble you. Then, but of course, this pigeon was not ordinary pigeon. It is incarnation. It is actually Agni Devata has come in the form of pigeon. Then right behind the pigeon, there is an eagle that is attacking the pigeon. And that eagle is also not an ordinary eagle. It is actually none other than Indra Devata, who has come to test Shibi Maharaj. So the eagle comes and tells Shibi Maharaj, please release that pigeon. This is my food. I need my food. But the pigeon has taken shelter of the king. So the king says, look, this pigeon has taken my shelter and I have awarded protection. So why don't you ask for something else? And the pigeon says, look, I'm hungry, I need food. What else? I cannot do anything with your gold or land or rice. I eat meat. So please give me your flesh otherwise. So Shibi Maharaj says, all right, this pigeon seems to be some 3 pounds. Looks like it. Let me take his very hatta, strong king, not like nowadays Kaliuga, right? Just walking around, barely able to walk. So he was really strong, 6 packs, everything was there. So he took one swab of his thigh muscle or somewhere, it's not mentioned exactly where. This artist has shown it as taken from the thighs. But he took some little bit of flesh and gave it to the pigeon. Pigeon said, look, how do I know that this is equal to the pigeon? Now let us be a little bit systematic here. Please get me one balance. We will put pigeon on one side and then put your flesh on the other side. So the king arranged for that. And then the pigeon was kept on one side and the flesh was kept on the other side. But magically the pigeon became heavier. So the king said, all right, no problem. I may miscalculated. Let me give some more flesh. So he cut some more flesh and gave. And it should have been okay. But the pigeon again became heavier. So like this, the king started giving some flesh. And after some time, king realized, I think this is not going to work. He came and sat on the bean balance himself. He said, you take me entirely, you please eat me, but spare this pigeon. So seeing this gregarious, this chivalrous nature of the king, charitable nature, pigeon and the eagle, they reveal the true identity as Agni Devata and Indra, and they blessed the king, and then they went away. So the Shibi Chakravarti, he was very pious king, ruled with full knowledge of Vedic literature, and he had a close friend. His name was Yayati. When Yayati, after leading a long life, ultimately there was time to pass on. Both Yayati and Shibi undertook their journey together. And Shibi was aware of where he will go. So he told Yayati, why don't you take my place? Shibi was charitable in nature. So he knew he was going to go to a heavenly planet. So he told Yayati, look, I think you deserve this more than me. I am giving this to you. You take it. Yayati was another famous king. So, but Yayati said, no, thank you. You deserve it, so you please keep it. And everybody came to know about this act, chivalrous, charitable nature of the king, even at the time of death. He is willing to give up his position in the heavenly kingdom to King Yayati. So this incident was related by Yayati to another rishi. His name was Ashtaka Muni. Ashtaka Muni. So Yayati and Ashtaka Muni were traveling together to the heavenly abode. And at that time, Yayati related this to Ashtaka Muni. And at that time he said, Ashtaka Muni asked, so where has he gone? Where is he going? He's giving you some place. Must be some very important place that you turned down. What is that place? So the answer to that was, he said that he has become one of the persons in the assembly of Yamaraja. So Yamaraja has an assembly, and Shibi Maharaj was going to get a place in Yamaraja's assembly. So, but he does take that place because Yayati does not take it. So Shibi Chakravarti, he takes that place, and at that time in Bhagavatam it is mentioned, Yayati is relating this, that Shibi Chakravarti had accepted Yamaraja as his worshipful deity. And as a consequence, he has reached Yamaloka. Ordinarily, Yamaloka is a Narakaloka. It is one of the hellish planets. But assembly of Yamaraja, that's a very exalted position. And Yamaraja himself is a great devotee, one of the 12 Mahajanas, exemplary character. So, by accepting this pure devotee Yamaraja as his worshipful deity, Shibi Maharaj attained this position in the assembly of Yamaraj. So this is an example of how a person by worshipping a demigod, reaches the planet of the demigod. Like this, there are many instances. And there are recommendations also, and that is listed in the Bhagavatam that I was referring to, second canto, third chapter. There is a description of various devatas that one can worship if one wants. I made a catalog of those. If you're interested, if you have any of these desires, you can consider. Do you want to worship devatas? You can worship. If you want, you want a powerful sex life, you can worship Indra. If you want good progeny, you can worship the Prajapatis. It is in bold because I later ask for this question. So please note this. If you want good fortune, Durga Devi, you can worship Durga Devi, you get good fortune. If you want to be very powerful, you can worship Agni Deva. If you want to become wealthy, Vasu, hero, Rudra incarnation of Lord Shiva, Lord stock of grains, Aditi, residence in heavenly planets, Devatas, worldly kingdom, Vishwadeva, popularity with general population, Sadhya, long life, Ashwini Kumaras, strong build, earth, stability in your post, worship horizon and earth combined, to be beautiful, residents of Gandharva planet, a good wife, Apsaras and Urvashi, society girls, domination over others, Lord Brahma, tangible fame, personality of Godhead, good bank balance, Varuna, to be greatly learned, Lord Shiva, good material relation, Uma, protection of heredity and advancement of dynasty, various devatas, domination over kingdom or empire, Manus, victory over enemy, demons, sense gratification, moon, spiritual advancement in knowledge, Lord Vishnu or his devotee, no material enjoyment, supreme personality of Godhead. So all these different varieties of devatas can be worshipped depending on what you want. And then, Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, however, whether a person has all kinds of desires or no desires or desire for liberation, one must worship the Supreme Lord with great intensity. Akama sarvakamo va moksha kama udharadhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajate purusham param. Akamaha. Akamaha means one without any desires. Sarvakamaha means a person having all kinds of desires. Va or moksha kama, one who wants liberation, desires of liberation. Udaradhi means a person with broad intelligence, broad-minded person. Tivrena, great intensity, bhakti yogena, devotional service. Yajate Purusham Param, one should worship the Supreme Lord, Purusham Param, Paramapurusha, Supreme Person. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desires, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole Personality of Godhead. So in this, there is something called, of course, all of us belong to the category of Sarvakama, or having all kinds of desires. But the first word in this verse is Akamaha. It is interesting to understand what is this Akama. Akamaha means a person without desires. But really, what is the meaning of a person without desires? Because we all have a constitutional position as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Amaivamsha Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha. So, being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, naturally, our tendency is that we want to serve the Lord. We want to see the Lord happy. We want to participate in the mission of the Lord, just as every part of the body is participating in the mission of the body. Right? Our hands are assisting in eating the food, in carrying out the mission, whatever we want. The hand does not have its own free will. The hand does what you want. The legs do what you want. Similarly, as part and parcel of the Lord, our constitutional position is actually to do what the Lord wants. So what is the meaning of a person without desire? Because such a thing cannot exist. Because we are designed to desire for the Lord. Therefore, Jiva Goswami, he explains that actually Akamaha, or desireless, means Bhajaniya Parama Purusha Sukha Matra Swasukhatvam. Bhajaniya Parama Purusha Sukha. That is, worshipful Parama Purusha, Supreme Person, Sukha Matra. Sukha is pleasing. Matra is only. Swasukhatvam is my own pleasure. My happiness lies in the happiness of the Supreme Worshipable Lord. That is called desirelessness. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this desirelessness as Bhajaniya Parama Purusha Sukha Matra Swasukhatvam in his Sandarbha. So Sandarbha is one of the prominent books written by Jiva Goswami. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. It's a interesting statement to make. Let us just look at this one more time. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. So what does it mean? Because when, let us say, you are experiencing happiness. You are experiencing happiness. How can I experience it? Whoever is experiencing happiness is actually experiencing the happiness. How is it possible for somebody else to experience that? And this is a slight, can say, insight to be gained in our own state of mind. What gives us happiness? We often think that experiencing happiness means for me to experience happiness. But in thinking so, if we contemplate, what do I mean by me experiencing happiness? If we just break that down a little bit, if I ask somebody, okay, what gives you happiness? Somebody may say, I think after a good meal, if I can have nice rasagulla, gives me a lot of happiness. Okay, this is good. But let us examine that a little bit more closely. When you eat the rasagulla, who is actually experiencing the happiness? First, the rasagulla touches the tongue. So tongue is enjoying. So am I the tongue? I am not the tongue. And yet, when the tongue is experiencing the joy, I am thinking that I am experiencing the joy. So that means actually my happiness is not my happiness. It is the happiness of that with which I identify. Because I'm identifying with the tongue, therefore when the tongue experiences happiness, I'm experiencing happiness. But actually, if we identify with the Supreme Lord, then when the Supreme Lord experiences happiness, we can experience happiness. That is true happiness. A tiny bit of this is actually present in all of us. This understanding that happiness can be experienced when others experience happiness or the Supreme Lord. We are not able to understand Supreme Lord, but the understanding of the fact that the happiness that I can experience coming from somebody else's happiness, that is present in tiny quantity in all of us. So there is a quote, there is a very nice explanation for that given by Srila Prabhupada. I'm just reading from this, it is there on the screen. This intuition of the living entity is sometimes manifested even during the conditioned stage of a living being, the material world. And such intuition is expressed in the manner of altruism, philanthropy, socialism, communism, etc., by the underdeveloped minds of less intelligent persons. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others in the form of society, community, family, country, or humanity is a partial manifestation of the same original field in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. So, in our pure state, we can feel the happiness in the happiness of the Supreme Lord. But in the conditioned state, we don't have this understanding because we have forgotten our relationship with the Supreme Lord. We do not identify with the Supreme Lord, and therefore we are unable to relish in his happiness. But because that little bit of that knowledge is still there, although discovered, it manifests itself in philanthropic activity. Sometimes we feel good when we do good to others, right? Let us say that some elderly person comes, you're sitting down, you may get up and give the seat to the other person, and you feel good. You feel happy that you've done something good. And similarly, let us say that there is somebody who's suffering, you want to give some $1, $2, something to that person, so you feel good a little bit, right? Okay, I've done something good. Or some people may donate to the hospital. Let's say they received some good treatment in the hospital, then they might, when they get discharged, they might give some donation to the hospital. or to some anath ashrama, various orphanages, etc. So all these kinds of philanthropic activities, they certainly have a feel-good element to it. Anyone who has done any kind of philanthropy attest to that for sure. Here is the explanation for why it is so. It is so because it is a portion, it's a partial manifestation of your original understanding of how happiness works. In your original understanding, your happiness is contingent upon Supreme Lord's happiness. And because you have forgotten Supreme Lord, now you are trying to find happiness in others' happiness. So when you get the philanthropic intent, when you feel sorry for somebody or you feel that you want to, of course, in Vaishnava community, everybody is paradukha dukhi. If somebody is suffering, we cannot tolerate, right? We must go and try to help somebody. But what is the right kind of help? That is a different discussion. Because saving the dress of a drowning man is not going to help. If somebody is drowning in the ocean, and the right thing to do is to throw him a rope so he can catch and you can save him. But instead of throwing a rope to the person, you say, can you please take out your dress? And then the person takes out his dress and you save the dress of the person and let the person drown. Is that very good? That is not very good, right? So similarly, actually the suffering person is a spirit soul. It's just trapped in this body. So when a person is suffering, we have to understand the root cause of the suffering. The root cause of suffering is forgetting Krishna. And therefore, our philanthropic activity is to actually remind the person, bring the person back in touch with Krishna. That is the highest philanthropic activity. But that aside, when we notice this philanthropic instinct within ourselves, this is a reminder to ourselves that actually this is a manifestation of my original understanding of happiness, in which my happiness is dependent, contingent upon the happiness of the Supreme Lord. These other processes that have been described, the worship of the devatas, or etc. What is the benefit of that? We will come to that in a bit. But before that, we see three distinctions that are being made in this particular verse. Akama sarvakamo va moksha kamarudharati tivrena bhakti yogena prasate purusham param. In this, there are three specific points that are being made in the purport. One is the distinction between akama and sakama or kama. There's an akama spirit in which a person is desiring for the satisfaction of the Lord. And in this material world, it is very difficult to achieve a pure akama state. The complete manifestation of akama state is obtained in the spiritual world. And the kama spirit, or the desire to experience one's own happiness through one's own sense gratification, through one's own senses, like taking a rasagulla, putting it in the mouth. So tongue is tasting that rasagulla, right? So whatever effort we make towards our own sense gratification, that is called kama spirit. And whatever effort we undertake for the Lord's satisfaction, that is called akama spirit. Even if somebody says, look, I am tired of this existence. So much of suffering is there. There is really no peace. There is no happiness. I simply want to eliminate my existence. I want to merge to Brahmajyoti. I want liberation from this existence. I don't want existence anymore. If somebody says that, that is also called kama spirit. That is not akama. Because in that spirit of trying to merge the impersonal Brahmajyoti or impersonal Brahman effulgence that is coming from the Lord, that merging into that, when it is driven by the desire to become free from material miseries, that means you actually want happiness for yourself. Since your motivation is to want happiness for yourself, that is called still kama spirit. And this is fully exhibited in the material world. So this is the first point that is made here, is kama versus akama. Then there is also a mention of two kinds of intelligence, udharadihi and ritagyana. Udharadihi means broad-minded intelligence. This broad-minded intelligence or broader intelligence is coming from the fact or from the understanding that the giver of all the benedictions that one may approach the devatas is actually the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is empowering the devatas, and therefore the devatas, if you worship the devatas, let us say somebody is worshipping the devatas, and devatas are giving some benediction. But those benedictions are actually coming from the Lord. Or let us say somebody wants liberation, and you're worshipping either some devata or even the Lord for liberation, or one is meditating on the void, or following the process of speculative knowledge to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. In all these cases, avoiding the merger into Brahma Jyoti is actually given by the Lord. So, given the fact that the Supreme Lord is actually the bestower of these benedictions, is it not better, therefore, to directly worship the Lord? This is called broader intelligence. But the opposite of this is Hrita. That is, there are different words in Bhagavad Gita. When a person's intelligence is distorted by material desires, kamai stai tai Hrita prapadyante anya devata tam tam ivam asthai prakrutya niyata swaya. So when a person's intelligence is distorted by material desires, that is called Hrita. So these are the two kinds of intelligence. A person who's actually intelligent will directly worship the Supreme Lord. But a person whose intelligence is there, but the intelligence is distorted. Like for example, sometimes we have our mic system problem. Sometimes you hear distortion. Maybe there are too many electrical things nearby, and you'll hear some distortion. So when there are too many allurements around and you get defocused by all of those things, you forget what you're really trying to do. That is called intelligence getting distorted. When a person's intelligence is distorted, then the person thinks that actually the bestower of benedictions is the devata. Therefore, let me make this particular devata as a supreme lord and start worshipping the devata. So that is the second part. Second point is drawn out. The third point is something about intensity. So in this verse, this verse is akama sarvakama, that verse. There's a mention of tivrena bhakti yogi. Tivra, very, very intense. And the opposite of that is, of course, lethargic, not very intense. So how one should worship the Supreme Lord? Tivrena. Now, there's a quality to this tivrena. The quality is unmixed ray of sunlight. Let us say there's a cloudy day. There is sun, but the rays of sun are passing through the cloud. And when then such diffused sunlight falls on your body, it's not too hot, right? Normal, pleasant. Maybe sometimes you're a little chilly, cool. There's a cool breeze blowing. You want to cover up. But if the clouds are not there, and there is a direct ray of sunlight, hot summer sun directly falls on your body, then it's very hot. You can get sunburns. So Tivra is actually referring to a ray of sunlight which is not obscured by any clouds. There is not a completely clear sky. There's a ray of light that's directly hitting. So how intense that will be. That is called Tivra. So the analogy given here of Tivra Bhakti is that one must be unmixed in one's devotion. Unmixed. So that is where akama sarvakama moksha kamadharti is there, yes. But one must aspire to be akama, desireless. In other words, only desiring for the happiness of the Lord. So the intensity that we must aspire to is that intensity which is unmixed, which means pure devotional service. This is the aspiration that we should have. This is what is recommended in this verse. So after saying all these things, the next verse in Bhagavatam has a major revelation that gives us great insight into exactly how we can achieve the state of unmixed devotion, of Tivrena Bhakti Yogina, this unobstructed sunlight, taking that analogy. If you want to have that kind of an unmixed devotion, Akama Bhakti, how is that possible? So the verse that describes this is Etavan eva yajatam ihane nishreyaso dayah Bhagavati achalo bhavo yad bhagavata sangatah. So this verse is talking about Bhagavati achalo bhavo. Achalo means unshakable faith, unshakable devotion. Bhava is devotion here. If a person has to develop achalo bhava, unshakable devotion to the Supreme Lord, then that is only possible yet bhagavata sangataha, only in the association of a pure devotee. It is not otherwise possible. So these are the same sequence of verses in which all those different systems of worship of devatas was given. Remember, I had cataloged 24, 27 or different things that you would want and what demigods, etc., that you should worship. Right after describing all of that, then there is a verse that says, Akama Sarvakama Vada. No matter what be your state, whether you're desireless or you have all kinds of material desires or you want liberation, in either case, you must worship, render loving devotional service with great intensity, with unmixed great intensity to the Supreme Lord. Right after that, this verse says how to go about doing it. This verse says you cannot achieve that unless you have the association of a pure devotee. All the different kinds of worshippers of multi-demigods can attain the highest perfection of benediction, which is a spontaneous attraction, unflinchingly fixed upon the Supreme Personality of God, only by the association of the pure devotee of God. So without that, it's not possible. There is this phenomenon. I don't know if you've heard about it, but I have heard this from my father. When I was younger, he would tell me that in the villages, he was living in one village, and sometimes they would have to go to other villages at night after sunset, and they would have to go through areas that were not very inhabited. Sometimes there would be a wooded area, foresty kind of an area, and sometimes they would see flashes of light in the forest, and it would be like a fireball that would come up. And he says he has seen it a couple of times, and the villagers would refer to them as some kind of ghosts. They would be called some category of ghost. And of course, later in my school, there was a scientific explanation for that given. This phenomena is actually widely studied. And there is apparently something called marsh gas. I don't know if you all heard of it. Have you heard marsh gas? Methane. Marsh gas is methane. So in areas which are marshy, wetlands, the plants, when they're decomposing, they produce methane. And sometimes methane will spontaneously combust and produces that light or fire. Immediately, just comes and immediately goes. It rises up like that. A ball of fire will rise up. Sometimes it will appear to be bouncing. But in the villages, simple folk, they would call it a ghost or something like that. And this has been observed for centuries. So normal people, they try to find out. Let's say some curious villager is there, and they're not afraid of these ghosts, and they see some source of fire. Right? Immediately they'll try to follow. So let me go see what happened. They'll go stand there. That's where the spot of fire was, but now there is nothing there. It looks perfectly normal. And far away somewhere else there's a fire. Then he goes there, but now that place there's no fire. Somewhere else there's a fire. It is just constantly chasing. You don't really get anywhere. Fire never happens where you are standing. It's a very random phenomenon. This is called a will-o-wisp in the English language. This kind of a thing of chasing a kind of a flash of light, trying to figure out what it is. It's called a will-o-wisp. There's a very interesting passage in the purport of the previous verse. I'll just read this. The living entity in its pure state is conscious of the fact that he is part and parcel of the Lord. But when he is thrown into the material world on account of his desire to lord it over material energy, he becomes conditioned by the three modes of material nature and thus struggles for existence for the highest benefit. This struggle for existence is something like the following: the will-o-wisp under the spell, something like following the will-o-wisp under the spell of material enjoyment. I had quoted this verse earlier, Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke. Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manashasthani Triyani, Prakritisthani Karshati. So Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke means that we are all part and parcel of the Lord. That is what is being said here, right? The living entity in his pure state is conscious of the fact, in pure state, not in the current state, conscious of the fact that he is part and parcel of the Lord. But when he is thrown into the material world, then what happens? Prakriti sthani karshati. He begins struggle. begins to struggle for existence. Kashyati means struggle. So this struggle for existence, chasing after one dream after another dream, which is never ending. This constant chase of one thing after another thing after another thing is compared to the will-o-wisp. So the karma spirit that we spoke of earlier, by which a person takes up to the worship of the devatas, deva 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 vrata yanti yanti deva vrata deva pitran yanti pitrvrata bhutani yanti bhutejya. So these three categories, they are all chasing after something. Why are people worshipping devatas? Kama is taikya prapadyante anya devata, driven by material desires. There is another verse in Bhagavad Gita. Kamkshatah karmanam siddhim yajanti iha devata. So driven again by material desires. So person approaches devatas driven by material desires. But when these desires are met, is a person satisfied? No. No. There's the next will-o-wisp, the next thing that you're chasing after. So this constant chasing never ends. And that is why the person who is chasing this benediction by devatas is considered to be kritagyana. His intelligence is distorted. And there is another analogy that is given, analogy or rather I should say examples, that this is not that only people like us now in this Kali Yuga who's who are so much distracted that we have this problem. It is not so. Throughout the history, there have been so many kings and great persons who are very well known in the universe who have all fallen prey to this. You all heard about the story of Hiranyakashipu, who was done extreme penance, tapasya, to please Lord Brahma. And we all know what happened to Hiranyakashipu. His body was torn apart after having conquered all the three worlds. When the devatas were at his feet and they were afraid, even if he raised one eyebrow, people would be running for fear, the devatas. After having reached that state, his body was torn apart by the nails of the Supreme Lord. So this worshipping of devatas, Prabhupada compares this to the term of phantasmagoria. All the plans for material enjoyment, worship of different demigods as described in the previous verses of this chapter are by modernized advancement of scientific knowledge without the help of God or demigod or illusory only. For despite all such plans for happiness, the conditioned living being within the compass of material creation can never solve the problems of life, namely birth, death, old age, and disease. The history of the universe is full of such plan makers. Many kings and emperors come and go, leaving a plan-making story only. But the prime problems of life remain unsolved despite all endeavors by such plan makers. Otherwise, both materialistic way of life, without any information of God or the demigods, and the life engaged in the worship of demigods and pursuit of temporary material enjoyments, are different phases of phantasmagoria. So this image is representing, the imaginary palaces that people build in heavens, palace or in the clouds. In Hindi, there is a saying, phrase, Hawaii Kila. Hawaii Kila is like a fort in the clouds. That is, a person may be just lying under a tree and imagining that, hey, let us construct a fort. Maybe I'll get, by selling these pots, I'll make some money and I'll make a massive big palace. And the palace will not just be on the ground. My palace will be in the clouds. So I think in China there is a temple called Temple of Clouds or something like that in Beijing. It was supposed to be so tall that it crosses the clouds. But actually it's not like that. I've been to that. It is ordinary building. But anyway, this phantasmagoria is chasing after things that don't exist really, just imagining that there's a pleasure coming afterwards. Therefore, unless the gross materialists or the worshippers of the temporary demigods come in contact with the transcendentalist, like the pure devotee of the Lord, their attempts are simply a waste of energy. Only by the grace of the divine personalities, the pure devotees of the Lord, can one achieve pure devotion, which is the highest perfection of human life. Only a pure devotee of the Lord can show one the right way of progressive life. So in today's verse, we are seeing that there are two categories of destinations. One is that either when we reach the devatas or the ancestors or the ghosts and spirits, or one can reach the destination of the Supreme Lord, Krishna Loka or Vishnu Loka. Unfortunately, the people do not know the sublime place of the Supreme Lord, that such a place exists. They do not know that simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, one can achieve perfection in life and go back home, back to Godhead. But this knowledge is only possible if one takes up to the process of devotional service with great intensity. And this attainment of such great intensity, attainment of unmixed devotional service is only possible by the association of a pure devotee. Otherwise, it is not possible. So with that, I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments. Phantasmagoria. Imaginary. It's like chasing your tails. Basically, it doesn't exist. The utopian dream world where all your desires are met. So you're living in a make-believe world. Comments from all of us, you mentioned Jiva Swami's reference. I know where we can. There is the purport of that verse. But it doesn't say which verse number in Sandarbha. It just says, quotes that verse. The purport of that 2.3.10. Any other questions? There are no other questions. We'll stop here. Grantra Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaur Premanand.